Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Aurum podcast once again. It's so good to have you with us today. It's been raining in Kenya, finally, across the country, and that refreshment, I believe, will be brought here at our podcast today. I'm your host. My name is Tony Kuria, and this is the Aurum podcast that is hosted by Aurum Consultants, a HR and risk advisory consultancy based here in Nairobi. And this month, we are talking about workplace compliance. The statutory requirements that you need to meet, you in your business, in order to be aligned with the government regulations and also to protect you if you're in business from unnecessary risks. I'm so glad that you could join with us. Today we have the Aurum crew today with us, starting with the Managing Director, Madam Zipporah Kuria. Welcome, Zippy.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning, viewers. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, and with us is one of our HR managers, one of our managers here at Aurum Consultants, Madam Doreen Wanja. Welcome, Doreen.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. Good morning, viewers. I'm glad and happy to be able to join this session today to enlighten you and to enlighten employers and employees. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, as I said, we are discussing this month's theme is workplace compliance. And today we want to talk about HR audits and how they keep an organization compliant. Most people uh, don't quite appreciate what HR audits are all about. I remember the first time when we were discussing this with these experts like Zippy and Doreen. I all used to know is audits in the common sense, in the usual sense we talk about it. We talk of audits, you think of accountants. You think of accountants coming to do an audit, a financial audit to a company. But apparently, there are also other types of audits. There are workplace audits. There are, labor audits, for example. There are safety audits out there. And therefore, today we want to discuss how HR audits, how they help review an organization's current practices, activities, and activities and practices in human resource management, so that we can see whether they are aligned to the best accepted practices when it comes to managing your staff. So, today we want to talk about this and see how your organization should be conducting HR audits regularly and what you would be missing out if you fail to be doing so. Today I'll change a bit. Today I want to bring the person on the ground. I want to bring a practical aspect to this. I know ZP is a strategic think tank, as it were. But Doreen, you are there at the ground. You actually what is designed or what you designed together with other HR specialists. You are the sharp end of uh, actualizing it. So let me start with you, Doreen. So I'll ask, from your perspective on a practical level,
Mhm.
what are HR why are HR audits necessary and important to an organization?
Mhm. All right. Thank you so much, Anthony. Number one, if I can begin with how the audit of HR processes works,
Yes.
it is to be able, first of all, to be able to determine or to be able to assess whether the processes, if the policies are benefiting the overall strategy of the business.
Mm,
So one key thing of the HR audit, or one of the key benefits sasa ile tunasema kwa ground, is to be able to assess if the processes are in line with the overall business, where the business is intending to be in the next 2, 3, 5 years.
yes.
The other thing that a HR audit is important for is
Yes.
we are all very scared of lawsuits, um, going to court, all of that. So the
Yes.
other importance of HR audits, which I've seen, really, it really plays a very key role in, is being
Yes.
able to identify, are there any dangers, or is the company in any way exposed to any potential lawsuits? Is
Okay.
there any potential for having employees or former employees going to court and being able to sue a company or being able to sue an institution?
Okay.
The other key thing of a HR audit is being able to see if we are compliant in very many ways. And for HR, there are very many key areas of
Okay.
compliance.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. If I could ask you a bit more, somebody
Mhm.
listening to us, we ask, okay, you've said there are very many areas where HR is needs to be compliant with. So, could you probably give us a few examples of the areas where an audit would ensure compliance? Yeah, just give us a few examples of the areas where you feel an audit would help an organization remain compliant. Say, for example, with labor regulations.
Okay. Um, I'll start with giving an example of the most recent development that has happened.
Yes.
Compliance with the new NSSF rates that have been given by the government. So
Yes.
that's one of the key areas that HR audits help to see, are we compliant on matters of
Okay.
relations to the government.
Yes.
The other key compliance area that was rolled out last year, we had the minimum wage bill being rolled out. So that
Yes.
is one of the key things that a HR audit helps to identify. Do we have any employees who are being paid below the minimum wage? And it's a required key component of HR. Are we compliant with the terms of engagement according to the Employment Act?
Mhm.
On matters working hours, on matters leave days, on matters off days, on matters pay and compensation that is non-discriminatory, on matters basically retention of records, on matters how payroll is being done, paying people according to the contractual obligation. So those
Mhm.
are just to mention a few key compliant areas that HR audit helps to identify and bring to the light for the employer to be able to know and to play a key part in complying.
Oh, thank you, Doreen. Indeed, those are very practical. As I said, yours is from a practical perspective, and those are quite a number of practical steps to you, a viewer and listener. If you're out there, you have a question, you probably have a discussion point. Probably you're thinking, okay, I've been there, I've been visited by the labor, many people from the Ministry of Labor. They raised certain issues and all that. Kindly throw in your comments, throw in your discussion points. We would love to incorporate them. Zippy, from your perspective, uh, uh, as a HR expert, why are HR audits and why are they necessary or important to workplace compliance? What's your view?
Thank you, Anthony. You know, one of the biggest questions I've asked myself over many years, and we've been doing HR audits for quite a number of years for our clients, is why we don't have a structured way of doing HR audits from the law. Because I think the government gives a good weight to financial compliance. But when it
Yes.
comes to people management, you find there is no given guidelines where employers have to comply and they have to do audits to make sure they are following given guidelines. But let me
Mm,
just go back and just give an overview of an HR audit because, and I think Doreen has shared a bit of this. We are not just looking at labor audits alone. We are looking at, it's an objective examination of your overall business practices, procedures, and any policies that you've put in place. And just
yes.
checking to see, are these policies that we are saying we've put in place being implemented, or are they just gathering dust in the shelves? And the goal here is to look at any challenging areas, any hotspot areas that you're not compliant with, or they can be a challenge not only for you in the law but also for the business from an overall perspective. And I think when I'm looking at HR audits, it's important for us to not just do this from a place of complying with the law, but also from a place of best practice. Yes, you can actually decide to do, let me do this so that I'm able to comply with the law and I know where I'm not compliant with the law. But what about if you are to look at HR audits from a place of best practice? So that again, the law is merely a guideline, because the law gives you the bare minimum you should be doing. So when you're looking at HR audits, actually, you should be fulfilling the bare minimum. But if you're looking at your business from a bigger perspective, then you need to be looking at best practice. So again, I think if you look at it from that perspective, you'll be more strategic and you're not doing it for the sake of ticking a box. And we keep on talking about compliance with labor laws, but do we take time to check ourselves and hold ourselves accountable as employers? I'm talking about I need to be compliant on this, or I am compliant with this, I'm compliant with this. And I hear all this all the time, every time we are doing audits, and you ask, different questions to see the level of compliance from a labor perspective. And the client will tell you, we are compliant in this, we're compliant in this, until actually you get to the real audit and you start actually unearthing things. And yet the client is actually thinking we are compliant. So again, we need to look at this from a bigger picture so that we are moving our businesses to the next level. And I think we need to start asking ourselves the questions of how come there are businesses that seem to do so well, where there are other businesses that seem to just grow to a certain point and they stop growing. Why? Because we are always thinking we are doing our best, but we have no checkup or check back system to check, am I implementing the processes we put in place? We have worked so hard to put SOPs in place. Are we implementing these SOPs? We have worked so hard to come up with a strategy. Are we implementing this strategy? Because when you're looking at HR compliance, you're looking at either the law compliance, you're looking at best practice, or you're looking even from a strategic perspective. Are we compliant in all these areas that we have said, we want to be compliant in? Not from the law only, but from a best practice perspective. And I think it's an integral best practice for a business, for any organization, to actually carry out regular HR audits.
Wow,
Back to you.
wow. Thank you. Indeed, Zippy, you've brought some aspects out there to business owners, to top managers out there, and even to just even if you're an employee. Zippy has brought something out that is very critical: the issue of best practice. Compliance, workplace compliance, whether it's in issues regarding the ones Doreen has brought about, the NSSF Act 2013 that has now been enforced by the court, by the Supreme Court, or the Employment Amendment Act, I think it was for 2021, the one that, issues regarding minimum wage. Best practice means then, as Zipia said, the differentiator between the best and the rest is how the best always want to make sure that they they are meeting they are meeting all the regulations that are there, and not just as a minimum but as a standard practice, in order to have best practice internally, even as they meet with external regulations. Now,
And actually, just allow me to add something.
yes.
When you're looking at this area of HR compliance, I think when you do regular audits, is the only probably is the only way of you being able to assess whether your HR processes and policies are benefiting your organization or they are harming your organization. Because sometimes policies can harm your organization. You might find a situation where you have policies, but they become so bureaucratic, they become so prohibitive, and the business is actually affected. So I think it's when you actually carry out these audits and you fact find and you do employee surveys, that's the only time you are able to actually tell whether whatever you've put in place, whatever systems you've put in place, whatever policies you've put in place, whatever SOPs you've put in place, are they actually beneficial to the organization? So again, look at it from a wider perspective so that you see it's not ticking a box, but it's actually benefiting the business, and you are able to get out, a report. And that report again is a report that can be implemented. One
Mm,
of the things when I'm working with clients, I always say, I would not want to do an assignment that will give you a report that will end up being in the shelf. Because
mm,
when you do that, it does not help the business at all. I've seen
mm,
situations, and again, probably this is an ouch moment, probably even for HR managers, where when you hear, the organization wants to do an audit, we panic and you're thinking, okay, they're trying to look for mistakes, they are trying to look for all these things. But you're
mm,
actually not thinking out of the box to see this is actually a practice that is going to help me do
mm.
better. Sometimes we sit back and we think we know everything. We don't. I don't know everything. I'm always learning every day. So I think it's important, even as HR managers, to actually embrace the issue of HR audits. And why am I saying this? Look at finance. Okay. Now, finance, sometimes they do it because the law requires them to do these audits. But does it help the business? It does. If you don't do your audit, you will not be able to actually manage your cash flow properly. What happens if you don't do your HR audits? Then you will realize you are actually not managing your processes, you're not managing your people well, and there are challenges. So I think as HR managers, we need to open up ourselves to say, you know what, come and check what I have done. Help me understand how I can do this better. Let's not be caught up in this comfortable cocoon where we feel I don't want someone to come and unearth something I have not done right. So if you've not done it right, then what do you need to do so that you can make it right? So again, I think it's a practice, honestly, I think as businesses, we seriously need to adopt. And I'm grateful because I've seen, the IHRM, they've really been trying to, to train and help HR managers just understand this area of HR compliance and help them understand you need to carry this more often.
Wow, wow. Indeed,
Maybe
indeed.
Anthony, if I can add
Yes,
that, I can add
ah,
to Zipporah's conversation.
yes, yes.
We've had scenarios where we've had clients call us to go do an audit, and we've had resistance, like actual resistance from the team on the ground, where the
Yes.
team feels these people have come to kick me out of my job. And
Mm,
it becomes so very difficult to be able to give feedback, which is the essence of an audit, to give feedback on which processes can be improved,
yes,
which data needs to be collected. And once the HR audit is complete, it is
yes.
able to give you a comprehensive report with action plans on what needs to be done, what needs to improve. And that gives the organization or the HR department a platform for continuous development. It creates and fosters a good environment or a climate for continuous improvement. What is working, what is not working, and what
Mm,
steps or actions can be taken to make the HR department better and adaptable to the generation that we are working with, which is the millennials.
okay, okay. Thank you, Doreen. Thank you, Zippy. You guys have brought out something that, issues regarding audits, trust me, ladies, they cause everyone to panic. Internal auditors, forget external, internal auditors. I remember during my career in banking, internal auditors would cause managers to immediately, when they receive a call that an internal auditor is coming just for a casual visit, suddenly the stomach starts running. Suddenly, people start, yeah, visiting the small room more quickly. Why? Because nobody likes being visited and being told, okay, Doreen, can I see what you have been doing? Zippy, can I look at your records? Whatever it is that you're doing. There's always that fear. But I want to talk to people out there. Our theme at Aurum, our theme is building winning teams. In HR audits, the reason why we as a consultancy help clients do it is to help you build a better team. It's helped you get better processes. It's helped you cover gaps and exposures that you could be exposed to both internally and externally to risks, and therefore, and especially to HR managers and HR practitioners, as Doreen has alluded, and Zippy also, when when an HR audit is coming to do you, instead of looking at it like they're coming to expose me, No, as CP has alluded, IHRM is trying to help the HR profession of fraternity embrace this so that they know what are the best practices that I ought to be carrying out. Now, let me move to the second point, and this one I'll come to you, Doreen, because you are a HR manager. Now, now the question that I want to ask is, I want you, Doreen, to help HR managers out there see this. As HR managers, what areas of compliance should they or you keep an eye on? You are a HR manager, you're running, you're busy, you have this section, department, whatever you're managing, you're HR officer, not even a HR manager, even a HR officer. So when you're seated there doing your job, what are the areas of compliance you need to be aware of every day as you do your job?
All right, thank you, Anthony. I'll start with the key area of compliance, and which is what we use as a benchmark as a HR department,
Yes.
the Employment Act. So compliance to the Employment Act forms part of the compliance requirements for HR. So the Employment Act forms part of the local laws that we
Yes.
need to comply with. And now in the Employment Act, there are very many items that we need to be compliant with. If I can go back to the examples that I gave earlier, we have compliance areas on matters of professional requirements. For instance, if it is an accountant, what do they need to have before they practice? For instance, if it's a HR, what do they need to have before they can practice? If it's non-discrimination laws or non-discrimination policies, those are areas that we need to be compliant with. Areas of compensation and remunerations, those are areas that we need to be compliant with. Areas of employment, areas of working hours, areas of what else? Areas of statutory payments and remittances. Those are just to point out a few examples of areas that we need to be compliant with when we are doing HR audits.
Okay.
Back to
All
you,
right.
Anthony.
Thank you, Doreen. At least you have been, you've put it. I wish you could have given a few more details, but it's okay. You have exactly given us what is very critical. Zippy, probably you could expound a bit more on the areas that Doreen has hinted about. Areas regarding the Employment Act. From your perspective as a HR consultant, what do you think about the areas of compliance that any HR, as long as uko na hiyo certificate, you have been employed as a HR, you have seated in the office the first day of the first day you have gone to that office. What do you think from your perspective are the areas of compliance a HR ought to always be looking at and making sure, hey, even if I'm visited by an auditor now, I'm ready to handle whatever comes in. Zippy, over to you.
Thank you, Anthony. And I think Doreen has covered most of them, but let me just expound a little bit on some of them. So
Yes.
one of the areas probably we will look at if we're doing a labor audit, and I said we look at audit from different perspectives. It could be a compliance audit. It could be a strategic audit. Now, when you're looking at a compliance audit, then we need to actually look at, for instance, labor practices. What kind of labor practices are you having within the organization? Are you treating your employees fairly? Doreen has talked about working hours. Are your employees actually coming to work on time? And if they're coming to work on time, are they being remunerated based on the working hours that have been stipulated? Are your employees working way long hours than expected? Are you giving your employees the necessary leaves? And these are just a few areas of labor practices. How are we handling some of these things that actually have been put in place by the law? Are you allowing your employees to go for leave? I've encountered an organization actually where employees are not allowed to go on leave, which is very interesting. So basically, you're employed, you're told you can't take leave at least until your probation is over. So what happens if you take any leave days before your probation is over? They actually recover it from your salary. But when you ask for your leave, they don't want to give you your leave. So you can even go for a year and after, you're not taking leave. You take a day here, a day there, they actually recover it from your salary. And these are illegalities, you cannot be practicing such kind of things because these are unfair labor practices. The other thing is business practices. As a business, how are you operating? Are you having good practices for your business? Are you having policies that need to be in place and they need to be implemented and they're being implemented in a fair manner? When you're looking at things like contracts, and this is an area where employers always get caught up, where your contracts, the way they have been worded, they become actually a gap. They become a hotspot for you. They become an area of concern because that contract, in the event of a dispute, will be used against you in a court. So again, looking at, how you worded your contracts, are they done in a way that is comprehensive enough to cover you as an employer and is comprehensive enough to cover the employee, and the employee actually understands what they're supposed to be doing? I've seen situations, and again, this is in issue of fair labor practices, where you engage an employee, you give them a contract, you don't give them a JD. Then a couple of months down the line, you tell them you're not performing. So my first question to you as as an HR manager, as an employee, would be, I'm not performing based on what? Because you have not laid the foundation for me to be able to actually do my job. So as an employer, you're actually failing in terms of doing the right things in setting up the employee for success. You're actually setting them up for failure. So again, these are some areas, we need to look at and say, are we actually doing this right? If we are saying our onboarding process is, top notch, can we audit this process and see, are there any gaps? Have we lost people along the way that is as a result of our own audit process that we think is actually very good, and identify those gaps and work on them? Doreen has touched on statutory requirements or statutory compliance. Again, this is another area where employers also always get caught. Some of them are very obvious, like NHIF and SSF pay as you want. But there are others, employers actually are completely not aware that they have a responsibility to be compliant. When you look at, for example, something help, your employee took a loan 10 years ago and they've come to work for you, and you actually don't think it's your responsibility to remit that money to help. Yes, as an employer, it is your responsibility, and you are supposed to find out and make sure you're remitting. And that's an area of compliance. If you look at NEA, again, employers always get caught up. They don't know, or they don't understand. They probably have not heard about NEA. Yet, actually, there's a lot of notices that go out. It's just that we don't actually get to see these notices, or we don't get to read. And I remember one time engaging a labor office and asked, how come you guys are not always sensitizing employers? And they said, we do. It's on our websites. We send, we put in the newspapers. And as an employer, it's your responsibility to actually know the areas of compliance you need to be compliant in. NITA, I've seen employers pay huge penalties. NITA is 50 shillings per employee. So imagine if you have not paid your NITA for 10 years and you have 200 employees, the kind of penalties you'll end up paying are massive. So these are some small things that seem like, they are simple, but if you're not careful to make sure you're complying, it can become such a big problem for you, for your business. When you're looking at things like, for instance, disciplinary processes, what is the defined disciplinary process for your organization based on law and based on best practice? One of the things, I'm really grateful for, and for clients we have worked with, there's no client who has worked with us who has ended up having a legal case. Why? Because we are very clear about our processes. And employers, we are very quick to actually violate these processes. And the one thing about, Aurum consultants, we are very keen and we are very firm and we are very, on time to advise you. If you take this direction, these are the likelihood consequences which we will not take responsibility for. So in other words, what have we done? We have helped the employer see it's not right to actually practice something that is outside the law. It's also not best practice. Do it, in a way that it helps the business. The other thing, of course, is like Doreen has mentioned, things like remuneration, the wage, the minimum wage. Are you complying with the same? Are you up to date with what the minimum wage is? and not just for, a general perspective, but for each position in your organization, because some positions are very well defined in terms of the minimum wage. So again, as an employer, as an employee, as a HR manager, you need to be well conversant of this area, so that again, you're checking back. But above anything else, for HR managers, we must implement best practices. Employers, sometimes we want to use us as rubber stamps. Do not allow yourself as a professional to be used to just rubber stamp. You need to be firm that this is a legal way of doing things. The least we can do is a bare minimum that is actually put in the law. But we need to go beyond that if we want to put the business out there and we want to actually succeed. When you're looking at, audits, the other thing I've noticed sometimes can be another issue is the legal cases that an organization might have had. It's important to go back and see how did these legal cases actually come about, and how can we mitigate this so that the business is not losing millions of money because of legal cases that could be avoided. Because I always believe, by the way, legal cases come to us because we are simply not putting policies in place. We are simply not implementing if the policies are in place, and we are trying to look out for shortcuts. That's how we end up actually having some of these challenges. So very important for us to just be aware of some of these things. But the area of compliance is wide. And I would say to anyone listening to us, you'd want to actually just check the health system of your HR department. Reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you. One of the things I tell HR managers, because I touched on this and I said it's an ouch moment, when HR managers panic when they hear there's an audit coming. The truth is, as a consultant, I have no interest on your job. My interest is to actually come and carry out that assignment and help your organization get to the next level. So it's important for you actually to be at a place where you say, you know what, I want to partner with you. I think I have done this very well. I think we might be struggling in this area. Please bring it out and help us know how we can be able to make it better for the organization. Back to you, Anthony.
Wow, that was comprehensive. Anyone listening to us
Anthony,
today?
maybe I can give an example.
Ongezea.
And Zipporah can confirm this. We've had scenarios where employees are being deducted the statutory deductions. But when it comes now to this other side of remittance, it's not being done so. And it comes to a point whereby the employee comes back into the organization 10, 15 years later to maybe claim their retirement benefits. And when the records are pulled out, the employee was being deducted, but the remittances were not being made. So that really puts the employer in a very tight spot, because now that means going back to the records, confirming that actually this employee was being deducted, how much were they deducted, how much do we need now to make sure that payments are made. It becomes a very big fight between now the employer and the employee. And that is now where we are coming in as Aurum, to emphasize and to give you the knowledge that it is important for you to comply. And not just because, as Zipporah is saying, it is not because it is the government is saying so or the employment law is saying so. It is for your own benefit.
Yes. Thank you.
Let me just add
Yes,
on to what Doreen has said, because we've seen actually businesses get caught up. We've seen businesses get caught up in this situation where you have actually deducted statutory deductions, but you have not remitted to the necessary authorities. Now, what happens? That can become a serious challenge for you as a business. And it's important for you to comply. Don't be left, don't be caught up. Because what I realize is when you don't remit for month 1, you'll be caught up with month 2. And when it starts accumulating, it starts becoming difficult to actually pay. And I know sometimes businesses probably go through financial challenges, but it's also important for you to work out your budgets. Again, and especially for SMEs, I think these are probably we don't look at very keenly. We don't actually audit to see, do we have the right number of people doing the right job? Do we have busybodies in the organization? Because you can end up having a very bloated wage bill, but not because as an organization you need all these people, but because we have hired. And sometimes I see all this all the time where the CEO will bring a CV and say, please call this person for an interview. I want to engage them for this. My first question as an HR professional is always, let's look at our structure. Let's look at our organogram. Do we have this position relevant? Can this person fit, or are we just employing because we are happy to employ and we are happy to give someone a job? It's very important for us to check some of these things, because these are the things that put us in a situation where our wage bill is bloated and we start struggling, and especially with remitting statutory payments. Unfortunately, this is an area I've seen even the government parastatals actually struggling with. It's a shame, that you'll find there are years of unremitted dues to the government, and we need to actually make sure this is happening. Otherwise, like Doreen is saying, if you've not remitted an NHIF and an employee gets sick, then what happens? They end up paying penalties at the hospital, which is unfortunate. If you don't remit their NSSF, they end up losing their retirement benefits. So we have a legal obligation to make sure we are doing the right thing and at the right time. And we can only do this if we set our structures well, if we do our audits in terms of just understanding the number of people we need for the organization and making sure we actually have the right number and we are not bloated in our wage bill. Back to you, Anthony.
Right, right, right. Every time I'm trying to say, you guys get an inspiration, bring a word, and that is so encouraging. But if you're out there and you have listened and you are like, wow, hey, these guys have just said what it is like, I've been found out, kindly reach out to us here at Aurum Consultants. We would love to help you. I like the discussion points that Zippy has brought, very practical things that Doreen has brought out, very practical issues, practical issues regarding how are you compliant. First of all, as a minimum requirement. Then secondly, as part of your business growth as an entrepreneur, to have best practices, you carrying out the best practices for your business. You do not wait to be told you have not complied with NITA. Yeah? You have not complied with NITA for the last 3 years. You have 150 employees. Each employee is, Zip, you say this, 50 shillings per month. Yes, 50 shillings. 50 times 2 times 150 times 12 months times 3 years. And then you're told, sir, this is your penalty. And then you start to sweat. You start wondering, okay, what is going on? Is serikali yetu itusaidii? But it is not the serikali. You'd never audited yourself to see where am I exposed. Unfortunately, most employers, and I'm not criticizing employers because I am one, many of us have the ostrich mentality. Kichwa kama imeingia, if the head is inside the sun, ignorance is bliss. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, ignorance in business is not bliss. You can be stung very, very painfully. So, as we come to the end of our podcast, in fact, I've not even brought to the third point that I wanted to bring in, but we'll keep discussing this topic as we go on. So, we have come to the end of our podcast today. And I want to speak to those out there who you're an entrepreneur, you're a HR manager, you're out there and you're wondering, okay, what do I do now? You guys have just exposed something that I've been feeling in my gut, in my gut that I'm not doing right, and you're wondering, okay, what do I do? Get in touch with us here at Aurum Consultants. You can always reach out to us. Our contacts are at the bottom of the screen via website, via LinkedIn, via Facebook, via YouTube. Our telephone contacts are also at the bottom of your screen. You can always reach out to us to come and help you look where there are gaps in your area. And even if you think you're reasonably well prepared, as it was alluded by our experts here, constant audits. It could be yearly, it could be twice a year, twice a year to be able to do your audits. Kindly put yourself to, let yourself be audited to see, are you still compliant? Are there areas that could come and bite you very painfully? Issues regarding help, remittance of help, remittance to from your employees if they have a loan with the Higher Education Loans Board system. It could be issues regarding Zippy said, NEA, National Employment Authority, or NITA, National Training Authority. All those are areas where you need to be compliant. So kindly reach out to us. We would love to help you. I'd love to help you. We would love to help you be compliant and establish the best practices that you could run with. Doreen, thank you very much for taking your time today. Zippy, as usual, thank you for taking your time to come and help us here. And to you, our audience, our listeners, our viewers, thank you for sparing your Saturday morning to come and be with us, to come and listen. As I said, even when we are off air, if you have a question, we always have access to our social media website. Send a question. Send a question so that send questions, send comments, send remarks, even criticism, send them. We would love to listen to them. And as we keep holding these podcasts, we'll be able to answer some of the questions that come in. Thank you very much for taking your time to join with us. Have a great weekend. See you next weekend. God bless you.